There's a particular kind of friendship that only reveals itself under pressure. It does not announce itself during the good times, the celebrations, or the career milestones. It shows up quietly, without fanfare, in the middle of the night when everything has gone wrong and the world feels impossibly heavy. The friendship between Hoda Kotb and Savannah Guthrie is exactly that kind. And in the early weeks of February 2026, that friendship was put through a fire that neither woman could have ever prepared for, and it came out the other side stronger than anyone watching could have imagined. To understand the full weight of what happened, you have to go back to September 2024, when Hoda Kotb stood in front of the cameras that had defined her life for nearly 3 decades and told America she was done. 26 years at NBC. 26 years of early mornings, breaking news, celebrity interviews, and raw human stories. She had given the network the best hours of her days, and now, at 60, she wanted something different. She wanted school pickups and bedtime routines. She wanted to be the kind of mother who was actually present, not the kind who waved goodbye in the dark before her children were even fully awake. Her youngest daughter, Hope, had health needs that required real, consistent attention, and Hoda had made her decision with the kind of quiet clarity that only comes when you have finally figured out what actually matters to you. Her last day on January 10th, 2025, was everything a farewell should be. The network pulled out all the stops, converting a larger studio space at 30 Rockefeller Plaza to hold the overflow of colleagues, fans, and well-wishers who came to mark the occasion. Her daughter stood beside her under the studio lights, a living reminder of exactly why she was walking away. Then she was gone, trading the anchor desk for a home in Westchester, trading teleprompters for PDA meetings, and trading breaking news for morning walks with other mothers in her neighborhood. She started a wellness company called Joy 101, developed an app, and by every visible measure, she was genuinely, peacefully happy. The television chapter of her life had closed. But life, as it always does, had other plans. On the night of January 31st, 2026, an 84-year-old woman named Nancy Guthrie finished dinner with her daughter Annie and son-in-law, was dropped off at her home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona, at roughly 9:50 in the evening, and walked through her front door for the last time. By the next morning, she had simply vanished, as though the night had swallowed her whole. Nancy was not just any woman. She was the mother of Savannah Guthrie, one of the most recognizable faces in American morning television, and the disappearance of an elderly woman with a heart condition and a pacemaker sent immediate shockwaves through the Guthrie family and quickly beyond. What investigators found at the scene painted a deeply disturbing picture. The back door had been forced open. Inside the house, a lamp had been knocked to the floor, a rug near the kitchen island was displaced, and Nancy's cell phone sat untouched, still plugged into its charger, as if she had only stepped out for a moment and expected to return. On the porch, forensic teams found drops of blood that initial testing confirmed belonged to Nancy. But there was something else, additional blood that carried a completely different DNA profile. It suggested that whoever had taken Nancy had not done so without a fight. The thought of an 84-year-old woman fighting back in the dark of her own home was both heartbreaking and, in some quiet way, entirely consistent with who Nancy Guthrie had always been. Because Nancy Guthrie was not a fragile woman. She was, by every account from those who loved her, one of the strongest people they had ever known. She had grown up in Kentucky, gone to the University of Kentucky, moved to Australia in the early 1970s for her husband Charles's career as a mining engineer, and raised her children with a steady, uncompromising faith in hard work and self-reliance. When Charles died suddenly of a heart attack in Mexico in 1988 at just 49 years old, Nancy was left a widow with 3 children, including a 16-year-old Savannah, and she did not take a single day to feel sorry for herself. She got a job at the University of Arizona and made sure every one of her children had a path to college. Savannah has spent years describing her mother in near mythological terms: hard, iron, granite strong. And those words carry the full weight of a daughter who truly believes every syllable. Nancy had continued to live independently in her Tucson home well into her 80s. She attended Baptist church every Sunday, stayed close to her children and grandchildren, and maintained the kind of sharp, engaged mind that made people forget how many decades she had lived. The only concessions she made to age were practical ones: limited mobility and the daily medication and pacemaker her heart required to keep its rhythm. She was, in every sense, a woman still very much alive and very much herself. And now she was missing. Savannah left for Arizona almost immediately, stepping away from the Today Show and into the chaos of an FBI investigation, police coordination, and the particular kind of terror that belongs only to adult children who suddenly realize their parent is in danger and they cannot fix it alone. The anchor chair beside Craig Melvin sat empty during one of the most emotionally charged weeks the show had ever experienced, and the staff, the viewers, and the network all felt that absence like a physical weight. It was against this backdrop that Hoda Kotb made the phone call nobody expected her to make. She told NBC she was coming back, not for a guest appearance, not for a special segment. She was coming back to work the desk, hold the show together, and free her friend to focus entirely on finding her mother. On February 9th, 2026, she walked back through the doors of Studio 1A, set her alarm back to 4 o'clock in the morning, and sat down in the chair that had defined the better part of her adult life. The retirement was on pause. The PDA meetings could wait. Savannah needed her. The explanation Hoda gave was not complicated or dramatic. She simply told the audience about the hospital. In 2023, when her daughter Hope had been sick and the fear inside her had been the kind that squeezes the air out of a room, Savannah had not sent flowers or a text or a carefully worded voicemail. She had shown up. She had been the first person to walk through that hospital door. For Hoda, that single fact made every other consideration irrelevant. You do not weigh sacrifices against memories like that. You just go. The investigation, meanwhile, was developing in directions that nobody had anticipated. On February 3rd, a ransom note arrived simultaneously at TMZ and 2 Tucson area television stations. The language was startlingly clinical, structured like a formal business document rather than a desperate criminal demand. $4 million in Bitcoin was required by February 5th. If that deadline elapsed, the price would climb to $6 million, with a final deadline set for February 9th at 5 o'clock in the evening local time. The note carried details about what Nancy had been wearing and referenced specific damage inside the home that had never been shared publicly, forcing investigators to treat every word of it as credible. The technological sophistication behind the demand was equally unsettling. The cryptocurrency wallet address included in the note had been set up through a digital mixer, a tool specifically designed to erase the financial footprints that investigators rely on. The kidnappers had clearly done their research. But sophisticated people still make mistakes, and on February 11th, someone made the critical error of logging into the ransom email account from a public Wi-Fi network at a truck stop near the New Mexico border. The FBI moved fast, but the suspect was already gone. What they recovered was hours of surveillance footage and a geographic reference point that narrowed the search considerably. Physical evidence continued to accumulate. A discarded work glove found in a drainage ditch roughly 2 miles from Nancy's home yielded DNA that matched the blood found on the porch, confirming the suspect had fled on foot before likely reaching a waiting vehicle. Doorbell camera footage from 1:47 in the morning on February 1st showed a figure in a dark hoodie and tactical mask, around 5 feet 10 inches tall, moving with deliberate precision and carrying both a handgun and a small flashlight. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit developed a detailed profile from the DNA evidence, narrowing the suspect pool by ancestral background and physical characteristics. Investigators also began looking at contractors who had worked inside Nancy's home in the preceding weeks, operating under the increasingly firm belief that this had not been a random crime, but a targeted one, planned by someone with prior knowledge of the property and of the family's public profile. On February 7th, Savannah stepped in front of the cameras alongside her siblings Cameron and Annie and delivered a message that stopped the country in its tracks. Her skin was pale with exhaustion. Her eyes held 2 weeks of fear compressed into something that looked almost like stillness. She told the world that the family had received a message from the people who had taken Nancy, that they understood what was being asked of them. And then she said 4 words that carried the full weight of a daughter's love and desperation. "We will pay." There was no anger in her voice, no threat, no defiance. She was building a bridge to people who had given her nothing in return. No proof of life, no photograph, no phone call, no reassurance that her mother was still taking her medication or that her pacemaker was functioning. She was offering everything on the chance that everything was still enough. Back in New York, Hoda was fighting the battle she knew how to fight. She understood something that investigators and officials sometimes underestimate. Public attention is itself a form of protection. The more eyes on a story, the harder it becomes for the people responsible to simply disappear. So she set about making Nancy Guthrie impossible to forget. She pinned a small yellow silk ribbon to her lapel on the morning of February 9th, and without a single word being spoken, every anchor, every contributor, and every guest who appeared on screen that day was wearing one too. People understood instinctively what it meant and what it asked of them. The ribbon traveled further and faster than anyone anticipated. Within 2 days, photographs were pouring in from across the country. Yellow ribbons wrapped around tree trunks in front yard from the East Coast to the Pacific. In Tucson, the symbol took root most deeply of all. Local shops gave out yellow carnations. Neighbors tied yellow fabric to the fencing around Nancy's community. Hoda opened each broadcast by showing one of these images from a viewer, turning the Today Show's reach into something that felt less like a news program and more like a national gathering. Her Instagram became something else entirely. Late at night, after her daughters were asleep, she would open her phone and post. Not polished, professionally lit content, but real photographs. Savannah and Nancy laughing together at a family celebration, sitting side by side on a porch, sharing a moment that had nothing to do with television or fame. Hoda would add just a handful of words. "Bring her home." She would then sit in her kitchen, still in her work makeup, and talk directly to her followers, thanking people for submitting tips to the FBI hotline, encouraging everyone to keep putting Nancy's face in front of new eyes. She knew that kidnappers operate more easily in the shadows, and she was committed to making those shadows as small as possible. What she was also doing, quietly and without announcing it, was watching over Savannah in the only way available to her from 1,000 miles away. Hoda had spent enough years sitting beside Savannah to know things about her that cameras never captured. She knew that Savannah Guthrie had been trained by her mother's example to meet catastrophe with composure, to lead when everything around her was falling apart, and to never let anyone see the cracks. That discipline had built a remarkable career. But it was now, in the middle of a federal kidnapping investigation with her mother's life hanging in the balance, becoming an almost impossible burden to carry.